They were very clear. They understand the importance of this issue. They're determined to get to the bottom of it, and that they will conduct the report, and we'll all get a chance to see it. They each promised that they would achieve that for us.
All right, quite an unfortunate turn of events there. In respect to that, we're joined by Victor Bwire, who's a programs manager at the Media Council of Kenya, as well as running trainings on safety and protection of journalists, specialized reporting and emerging issues in the media in Kenya and the East and Great Horn of Africa. Victor Bwire, thank you so much for making time. Well, of course, this is a matter that has been discussed the world over. And unfortunately, even in the 21st century, the all-important freedom and safety for journalists is still a matter that causes much duress, not just to the journalism industry, but to the country as well. In your capacity, what can you say about this?
Thank you, Rogers. One, it's a very unfortunate thing, and we condemn in the strongest terms possible the manner in which our colleague was killed in Turkey. That's unacceptable. And like you said, in the 20th century, that we are using very crude, archaic ways of dealing with journalists. This is a trend that we are seeing globally, that increasingly either politicians, governments, or criminal gangs or organized gangs are targeting journalists in their line of work as a way of blocking access to information or exposure of some of the ills and corruption some of these people are involved in. But that's a very crude manner of dealing, that the world has become so open that if some governments or criminal gangs would think killing journalists or intimidating or harassing journalists is a way of dealing with things or killing stories is unfortunate. And where we see that the Media Council of Kenya, yes, in addition to internationally what is happening and like what's happened in Turkey, which was very, very unwelcome, even in our own country, what we are seeing averagely every single day, we are getting journalists being harassed, beaten, and the most worrying bit is that while other institutions like Media Council of Kenya are doing their bits, but our sister institutions in government that are entrusted with the responsibility of protection and security, especially the police and DPP, have not been very helpful in terms of picking up and following up cases. We document, we get the cases, we share with the relevant authorities, but action has not been coming. The level of impunity in this country and globally is big time. Look at what's happening in Tanzania, what's happening in Uganda, that people will wantonly beat up journalists, harass journalists. We pick the cases, we share with the relevant law enforcement agencies like the police, like the IPOA, like the but nothing seems to be happening. So we are equally frustrated, but we are engaging. It's not that we have given up. In addition to engaging, like we are engaging now with the Inspector General of Police in Kenya here. Globally, we have written, we have joined other colleagues in writing letters to the President of the United States and the Saudi government to make sure that whatever happened to our colleague Khashoggi in Turkey is unearthed, and those who are behind it are prosecuted.
Well, Victor Bwire, even before I let you go, now with reference to Article 34 of the Constitution that touches on the freedom of the media, do you think the environment in which the media operates right now in the country is enabling or restrictive in retrospect or touching in terms of what the government is doing to actually facilitate this all-important freedom?
Thank you. The act is very elaborate, it's very progressive, it provides all the widest freedom of the media that one can think of. But in practice, that's not being seen. That there are, in fact, in addition to Article 34, there is the article on right to labor, right to help. So the journalists are being harassed, and especially at the counties. Today we are just getting a case where journalists have been beaten up and thrown out in Nyandarua County, and they have been injured, their cameras broken, which is very unfortunate. We have got another case from Migori, which have not, Homa Bay, which have not been sorted out. So increasingly, we have gotten just a case from Marsabit again, where a journalist has been beaten, Radio Jangwani journalist has been beaten, and his camera broken. Just today, those are 6 cases in a day. So while Article 34 is there, but the environment to which journalists are working in Kenya is unacceptable, and we as a country, under the UN Action Plan on Safety and Security, we need to come together and ask, do we need Article 34 if actually journalists are being harassed and cannot be allowed to do their their work the way it is happening currently. Article 34 becomes useless if journalists cannot be allowed to do their work, if they are being beaten every day and no action is taken from the respective law enforcement agencies.
All right. Thank you, Victor Bwire. That is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Programs Manager at the Media Council of Kenya. Thank you for making time. In studio, Robbie Koki, who's a USIU Journalism and Communication Lecturer. Thank you so much for making time. Perhaps we can build up from the question we asked our viewers. In your opinion, who bears the greatest responsibility for the safety of journalists and why?
Okay. Thank you very much for the invite. Just as Victor has said, really the Constitution should be able to provide safety for journalists, basically by ensuring that in the Constitution, which is the blueprint under which the country runs, that the journalist is protected. But of course, like Victor says, the link between practice and what is on paper, there is a gap that easily cannot be filled unless security forces, media houses, journalists themselves, who must protect themselves, are involved in this effort. And we cannot just ignore the issues as they come up, because based on the Committee of Protection of Journalists, 44 journalists in this year and last year in the whole of Africa basically have faced either death, or they have court cases, or their media houses destroyed. And this is an issue that needs to be looked at from a global perspective, and people must pay attention to it.
Okay, even as we talk about the freedom, and the safety of journalists, perhaps let's focus on the regulation of media. Where exactly do we cross the line? Because at times we see the media actually, rubbing shoulders with various governments in various countries when they're actually executing their fundamental right.
Of course, media is there to rub shoulders. It's a fourth estate. And depending on what it lives for or thrives for in that particular country, then you'll find that unless the media is a lapdog for that particular country, meaning that it more or less drives the agenda of the government, then media is there to have checks and balances on government. And the problem with checking and balancing of government, especially those governments that do not really embrace democracy per se, or those governments that don't take correction kindly, then the media is likely to be abrasive or aggressive on their part, and of course, create enemies with government, even if they are more or less reporting things that are of public interest.
Well, very true. Perhaps we can borrow from the unfortunate incident that happened to the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was actually killed in very bad circumstances. As journalists, where do we cross the line? As simple as that. Should we stand for the truth even if our lives are in danger? Yeah.
I think we have the tenets, and we always talk about it. Is it newsworthy? Is it of public interest? Is it timely? Do people need to know? Is it just? Those are the questions that we always ask ourselves in journalism. And therefore, without asking ourselves those questions, then we have no need to exist. And sometimes asking these questions calls for, being brave, being courageous, and telling it as it is. Of course, based on the fact that you have to have objective reporting, you have to give the other person the right to reply. Those are things that are more or less imbibed in our practice. And therefore, we exist to tell stories, and that's basically why we exist.
Bittersweet relations, as we've mentioned, between various governments and the media industry. Perhaps even as we continue with this very, very important art of informing the public, how should we continue in terms of, yes, we are supposed to rub shoulders with the government because we stand for the truth and we inform the public on something that is true and just. How should we continue with this, even as we comprehend the fact that journalists, as you mentioned, continue losing their lives in very many circumstances?
Journalism is one of the oldest professions. Even if it started out as yellow journalism or entertainment journalism, over the years, people trust what the media says. Why? Because the media exists to verify information, it exists to gather information, it exists to make sure that that information is packaged in a manner that it is closer to the truth. So as it is, if we do not check our governments, or if we do not check our institutions, or if we even do not check business entities in our country or in any part of the world, then it would be unfair to the common person, because they have the right to know. Media plays the role, or has the social responsibility, to make sure that things happen the right way and they tell the stories in the right manner. The challenge will be the challenge that will exist is if media do not, pursue its tenets, or do not follow processes as expected, or do not give people the right to reply to issues that are of concern, or do not go into the depths ethically to investigate stories and make sure that they are basically giving us the right viewpoint. So journalism remains, it stays, and today, unlike before, especially during the digital era, we are selling content. So content needs to be sold, and there's nothing that a journalist can do but write the stories.
Exactly. Yeah. As we finish off, Article 34 of the Constitution obviously touches on the freedom of journalists, but this does not necessarily mean that it's followed. Implementation is key. The document is just a document, but if we don't implement it, that's where the problem is. Perhaps as we finish off, the implementation of the media rights and freedoms, that is a problem. How do we address it?
One of the things that we have to realize, especially from our constitution, that it is a progressive constitution that needs participation. Participation from the citizen, and in matters journalism, participation from the media fraternity. Strengthening our professional bodies would be one way of looking at it. Being vocal about injustices in the media would be another thing about it. Giving ourselves limelight when issues like what Bwire has talked about. We should have stories about journalists who are basically suffering, who are challenged, who have lost their property. I think that should be priority. We should go on a media advocacy, campaign for ourselves, because we as media need to be protected, yes, but we need to preserve ourselves if we are going to be true to the society that we serve.
Okay, even as we speak about ethics, and how journalism as an art is supposed to inform the public, we ourselves come under pressure. We're human beings. Let's just borrow a leaf from TV journalist Jackie Maribe. How is this situation handled? Has it been handled the correct way, according to you?
I think we are not very good keepers of our brothers. I think that's one thing that we need to improve, but it calls for journalists to be organized. You have to be organized. Look at the law society. Look at the medicine, body. We have to look at ourselves as professionals who need to unite, especially when an issue is of concern. We might not do much about the court proceedings or such things, but there are support systems that we can provide to journalists, such as you can see what happened to Louis. We still need to have space for people who are in the media before and after, so that we can safeguard our interest as journalists.
Well, obviously not crossing the line on sub judice as well.
No.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Robbie Koki from the USIU, that's the United States International University, a journalism and communication lecturer, helping us break this pertinent issue down, touching on the security